Illness is said to be a great leveler of the human experience, and yet that is not exactly true. The global majority, and let us not forget, that is, anyone who is non-white, the majority of the population, are 2 times as more likely to have a chronic illness or to be diagnosed with a chronic illness than their white counterparts. And while men are, half of all men will at some point be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime, 1/3 of all women will. And 80% of all autoimmune disease are diagnosed for women. So women are diagnosed with 80% of all autoimmune illnesses. Now, one of the things that holds this group together, regardless of gender or race, is the sustained experience of being in a medicalized environment, one where most often we, patients, are not seen holistically or even as people beyond the lens of our illness. And this environment is dominated by male doctors. I myself am presenting this workshop from a lens of a person's body who's been saying no in one way or the other for the better part of 52 years. I joined this CI community in 2021, and from the beginning I noticed myself responding to certain cues given in the context of a CI session that assumed I had a body that would invite me to land in it and allow me to feel anything other than pain. And my response was to disassociate. I experienced counterwill sometimes. You might have even been my therapist. Or I even sometimes became disoriented physically. So one might say I got triggered. Now, on the one hand, it provided me with an opportunity to look deeper into what actually happened for me in those instances. On the other hand, being triggered in the context of a therapy session before safety, attunement, or orientation were established led me to dysregulation and bigger defense mechanisms showing up that even blocked me from being able to receive the session. So in 2021, I began a focus group as a support mechanism both for myself as well as other people in my shoes in the CI community. And of course, everyone was welcome, so CI practitioners working with bodies saying no also came into this space. So what I'm going to share with you today are findings from this group. Some of this workshop will be based on Gabor's work, which we're all very grateful to have in our hands. And some of this presentation will be based on my personal experiences. So this is a pretty well-known quote, but I'm going to read it anyway. Everyone who is born holds dual citizenship in the kingdom of the well and in the kingdom of the sick. Although we all prefer to use only the good passport, sooner or later, each of us is obliged, at least for a spell, to identify ourselves as citizens of that other place. Nearly 70% of all people in the US take some form of prescription medication, and 40% take at least 2. And the UK has very similar statistics. So worldwide, 1 in 10 people is diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and 1 in 4 women. Almost half of all people on this planet will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. And as we all get older, over half of us over the age of 50 will experience chronic pain. And we all at some point will work with people living in a body saying no, or become one ourselves. Whew. But it's not all bad news. There is a silver lining. Let me just find my mobile phone where I have a quote for you. Your conflicts, all the difficult things, the problematic situations in your life are not chance or haphazard. They are actually yours. They're specifically yours, designed specifically for you by a part of you that loves you more than anything else. The part of you that loves you more than anything else has created roadblocks to lead you back to yourself. You are not going in the right direction unless there is something pricking you in the side. For me, it was literally telling you, look here, this way. That part of you loves you so much that it doesn't want you to lose the chance. It will go to extreme measures to wake you up. It will make you suffer greatly if you don't listen. What else can it do? That's its purpose. And we all know that is allness. Now, I gather some of you have read When the Body Says No. How many of us have read When the Body Says No? Okay, I can go home. Again, another out for me. So when I first read this book, it was after many years of asking questions no doctor could answer, decades of living in pain and unaware that my belief system belonged to a wounded child who ran on fear. I questioned the root cause of my illness and was desperate to feel better. I tried every nutritional protocol, supplements, decades of therapy, yoga, acupuncture, functional medicine, naturopathy, homeopathy, and the list goes on. And over the years, the doctors dispelled any symptoms that were outside of their silo. They shut down any questioning by me about the origin of my illness, blaming everything on genetics. They poked fun at my tireless exploration of alternative therapies, and they cut me off when I had opinions about my own care plan. Reading When the Body Says No was the first time a window of tolerance opened. Were you at Sataram's talk? Yes, okay. Opened to the possibility that my illness was not a result of my own failure. It was also my first entry into compassionate inquiry and relief that I wasn't alone and that I shared certain traits with other people also coping with being chronically unwell. So to start with, let's look at some personality traits by the beautiful book of Gabor, A Myth of Normal. So I'm going to read it, but I need my glasses to do so. Okay. So these are the personality features present in chronic illness, autoimmune disease, and cancer. An automatic and compulsive concern for the emotional need of others while ignoring one's own. It's a good chance for me to ask, are you all okay out there? Yes? Okay. Rigid identification with social role, duty, and responsibility. Overdriven, externally focused, multitasking, hyper-responsibility based on the conviction that one must justify one's existence by doing and giving. Repression of healthy, self-protective aggression and anger. And harboring and compulsively acting out two beliefs. I am responsible for how other people feel, and I must never disappoint anyone. So one aspect of daily life for me and many others living with chronic illness is anxiety. Worry, whether it is about how the illness will affect us or our loved ones, or whether our body will show up for us on any given day, is common living with disease. And this leads us to questioning our symptoms. Are they real? Psychosomatic or imagined? And then there's the whole process of being seen by a doctor, which can take months or even years in some cases. And there's a lot of expectation and hope to see a doctor and finally get the help that you long for, only most of the time to be met with indifference. And that indifference for those of us living with chronic pain oftentimes is something that we may have already normalized, that we've learned to tolerate from a young age. And then there's the blurred lines between doctor and patient, where the doctor sometimes can take on the parent's role. So at one moment or the other in this trajectory, we're forced to become our own advocate. And this forcing us to become our own advocate leads us into two minds. On the one hand, we need to insist that the reality of our illness exists. And on the other hand, we face internal resistance to our own existence. Now, I wanted to take a moment to register that before the beliefs, the background for many of us who are chronically unwell involves some form of parental misattunement, which often results from parental immaturity. I know that for me it sure did. It doesn't mean there wasn't love, but it does mean that in many cases the child becomes the caretaker rather than being cared for themselves. So there's these three silos. The first one is about emotional reactivity, which means ultimately that with high emotional reactivity, there's poor emotional regulation. And this means there are intense emotional shifts. It may display as extreme emotional reactions to minor inconveniences, shifting one mood to the other, or reacting to emotions without consciousness or thought. And this leads a child to an unsafe place to express their own emotions. Emotional unavailability is about the emotional immaturity that comes out in the behaviors of aloofness, when parents may act disinterested or unconcerned with a child's needs. So a great example from my own childhood is the phrase, "It could be so much worse," or "We never beat you." These kind of responses inadvertently tell the child their experiences aren't bad enough. And the emotional experience they may be feeling is wrong, selfish, or something to feel ashamed about. Parents who are unavailable emotionally leave children feeling insecure, anxious, and unable to express themselves emotionally. And lastly, there's the lack of empathy silo. So a lot of this is about the inability to relate to others' experiences, in this case, the child, your own child. And when you can't connect through shared interpersonal experiences, you're unable to recognize how your emotions impact everyone around you. So this lack of empathy can lead to the child being emotionally reactive or being withdrawn. So based on this, let's see a show of hands. How many of you had emotionally immature parents? Now, it's a little small, and we're not going to go through every belief, emotion, perception, or coping mechanism. But I wanted to show you, maybe you can read a few of them yourself, that the coping mechanisms, perceptions, beliefs, and feelings of this group of chronically unwell people are no different to any other human being, nor necessarily is our backstory. There are millions of people out there who had misattuned parents who were not present for the child growing up, with coping mechanisms like these, who didn't get sick, or at least they haven't gotten sick yet. So the difference is, at some point, these beliefs, these emotions became suppressed and internalized to the point where the body had a response. Incidentally, I was reading a paper last night by the NIH, which is now grouping autoimmune disease and cancer together as one in many instances. That autoimmune disease has a whole system turning on a body, and cancer is a malignant cell. So they're one and the same a lot of times. And I believe the work of Gabor and his counterparts are instrumental in changing the ideology behind these diseases.